And can you guys read that clearly? Say yes.
My slides aren't potato. It's the connection. I'm sorry.
All right, so our next session is the art of post-infection response and mitigation, and it's being presented by Caleb Crable. Let's just talk about Crable for a second here. Caleb is a senior malware analyst at the Media Trust, and of course we just spoke about that. His presentation is the art of post-infection response and mitigation. You'll be discussing different aspects of end user and incident management, malware removal, mitigation techniques, tools of the trade, and general guidelines to follow and prevent infections from happening in the first place. To me, guys, this is a really interesting topic. This is kind of stuff that I deal with every day, and probably a lot of you as well. So I'm personally excited about this session here. So, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome Caleb Crable.
Thank you. And again, I apologize about the slides. It's computers. Why wouldn't something go wrong? So the art of post-infection response and mitigation. What the hell just happened on my network? There are probably some of you that asked that question today when you got an email about something that's going on your network. A lot of you, hopefully, are sysadmins or at least IT level people that have to deal with not only stupid user things, but advanced things that happen on your network that you might not know happened on your network. So a little bit about myself. My name's Caleb. People call me Chill. Some people tell me to chill. It depends on when you catch me. I'm a senior malware analyst at the Media Trust. The Media Trust basically does nothing that my talk is about today. So just to be clear about that, we are a pre-infection type company. We monitor threats kind of in the media cloud. So today my talk, hopefully it's a good talk, but it doesn't have anything to do with what we do at the Media Trust. I'm a security researcher extraordinaire. Just ask my wife when she comes down and I'm at my computer chair at 3 o'clock in the morning, still doing security research. I'm a care of bad things to happen to good people's networks. Hopefully you're good people, and I care about your networks. And I'm your huckleberry also. So if you ever get into a gunfight, don't feel like showing up, I'm your man. I am also the organizer of the CarolinaCon shootout, which we are in our 6th year. Sorry to plug so early in the talk, but if you're interested in other kind of regional security cons, CarolinaCon, check it out. Shootout, check it out. Hackerswithguns.com, a bunch of information there. So without further ado, the meat and potatoes. So what we're going to go over today is kind of into the gray, the post-infection world. And right now, there are millions of infections happening. Whether the infections are happening on mobile devices, whether they're happening on web browsers, whether people are just breaking into the network and dropping a reverse shell payload on your network, breaches are occurring right now. A lot of people don't know what to do. A lot of people didn't really plan on having an infection on their network. A lot of people talk about the possibility of having an infection on your network, but when the infection occurs, someone is red in the face wondering, what the heck do I do now? We didn't plan for this. We planned to not get infected, and that's just not logical nowadays. Plan to be infected. Plan for your network to have breaches. It's not realistic if you don't, unless you keep your entire network air-gapped. But then you still have physical threats like, USB drives with auto runs on them and stuff like that. Plan to get breached. That may sound a little disgusting, but plan to get breached. So there are 3 kind of general paths you can follow once your network is breached by a malware type infection. First is going to be reimage. Second, it's going to be WTF. The W can actually stand for what or why. Some cases, a variation of both, like why. And remove and analyze, which is my preferred path, and the path I'll be diving into the deepest. So we're going to go over some battle plans, kind of a general guideline of what you should think about in terms of how can my organization be prepared? What little things can I do just to make that happen? Can I have a security guy in my IT department, or at least a guy that reads like packet storm that is just a sysadmin? Even a step in that direction is a good step. You have to absolutely have someone that knows security around. Even if he's not working directly for you, have someone contracted. If you have an IT guy out there, the IT guy, make sure he knows a little bit about malware, because malware is one of the most prominent vectors for just to take control of things on the whole entire internet right now. So anyways, them tools. So after we go over some plans, we're going to go over just some tools. Some are well known, some are not so known, and just kind of tool methodology, which I hope kind of enlightens you to not just use tools, but see how these tools work. So why is post-infection a gray area? Well, for one, over-reliance on antivirus. Everyone says, oh, antivirus is dead. It's not. It's still kicking. People are still making money off of it. A lot of people like to talk about a world without antivirus. And as great as that sounds, it's not realistic. Antivirus is not dead. It's just kind of not the main thing anymore. What antivirus, actually, they should probably rename it from antivirus. It's more of a breach detection alerting mechanism, if anything. It doesn't stop anything. One time out of 100, it may stop something. But the rest of those times, the other 99 times, it's letting you know that you're already screwed. Or it's letting you know how long you've been screwed if you actually pay attention to those emails that keep flooding your inbox, or that, that Microsoft rules folder that keeps filling up and filling up and filling up, but you never click on to check. Check it, please. But yeah, over-reliance on antivirus, dangerous thing. Using antivirus for what it should be used for nowadays as an alerting system, very nice layer of protection to have. If you don't have antivirus, I'm not going to say anything against you, but hopefully every single other workstation and server on your network runs Linux. Second, malware persistent techniques. We're used to seeing like CryptoLocker and forms of ransomware, even the fake AVs. They pop stuff up. They make it annoying to use the computer, which is just about when the end users start complaining, because they've been using it the whole time, and they've been dragging it down into the corner, and they've been trying to use it, even if they specifically clicked on some kind of like docx file that infected their system. They're still using Word. It's probably still open in their taskbar. Nowadays, we have rootkits. If an attacker wants to control a resource on your network, they're not going to make it known that they have control of it. I mean, you may see some bandwidth fluctuations. You may notice little tiny tidbits of weirdness here and there, but generally, if the malware is supposed to persist and it's an infection that wants to gather data, or just part of a botnet. If you're on a really fast internet connection and I've measured your connection and I have a piece of malware running on your network that I can packet someone from, I want to keep that resource. The techniques involved with this stuff aren't in your face anymore. The in-your-face ones do what they need to. Extort money. Even the fake AVs, they would trick users into signing up money. They would just be annoying until you paid them to go away, and then sometimes they still don't go away. Depends on how many bitcoins you have. So lack of exposure and training, which is kind of the core of what I'm going to be talking about today. Lack of exposure and training. How many of you here work in IT? How many of you here are sysadmins? Aha, I knew some of you were here. All right, so if you evaluate your IT department or your pseudo IT department, you may just have some guy that, your organization may be small. You may just have one guy. But small to medium organizations tend to get hit the most because they're the most lax. Corporate IT, you got a SOC, you got IT department, you got people running around everywhere. It's normally the smaller and the medium to small businesses that get hit the hardest because they have the least amount of knowledge about what is going on. They don't even think about this stuff. They just think business as usual, whereas corporate IT, they have someone kind of thinking about that all the time, or they should anyways. So exposure and training to malware and kind of infections, very important thing. So malware breach responses, which is kind of very important. It goes along with having a plan built in to, mitigate this risk, remove this risk, see what the heck happened. So the first malware breach response, reimage. Now, everyone here, maybe, at least 90% of you, has probably just reimaged a machine for some odd reason, one day or another. Most IT departments don't care that there's an infection. They care that someone else knows that there's an infection. So they're going to do the fastest, quickest thing possible to get rid of it, to get whoever's on their back off of it. Just reimage the machine. Put the company image back on, reinstall Skype for them, let them go. This is an all right response, but not the proper one. What if you work at a tax collector, or what if you work at a small bank, or really anywhere nowadays? But if you work somewhere where there is data to steal that someone else might be interested in, you might want to find out what happened before you just reimage that machine. Basically, if you have an infected machine sitting on your network, you have the golden ticket, basically. You have an organic infection that happened as it should have happened. It's not some thing you're trying to replicate in a VM or a virtual machine. You have the organic infection sitting right there. It's doing its communications. It's doing what it needs to send spam out or, to probe your own network. So, reimaging is alright. It's quick recovery, that is the plus. But if you're going to reimage, please use lazy admin kung fu. Lazy admins are not really that great. If they know kung fu, they can be great. So all lazy admin kung fu is basically, before you image the machine, before you nuke it, before you pave it, before you reimage it, just take an image of it. If it's a Windows 7 box, you don't know if it's MBR infection, you don't know what it is, but you want to find out later, image the MBR. Take a 100 megabyte image of the MBR, take a 100 megabyte, or the Windows 7 boot partition is usually 100 meg. Take a separate take a separate image of it. Take an image of the main partition. Burn those to a VM. Boot it up in a controlled environment. Try to find out what happened. So keep records of these images. If they get too old, delete them. But if it's 2 months later and your boss is asking, hey, worm that hit us, what danger are we in? What did it steal? Well, I don't know. I just formatted the box. Oh, well, do we keep backups to that kind of stuff? Backups, we just reimage the box. Susan's already using the computer. So try to keep an image. Even if you don't have anyone that's security in your IT department, give it to them to play with and learn on. You have an infected image that got organically infected. It's a beautiful thing to have. So the second response path I would like to talk about is the worst, and it's the one that a lot of people are very guilty of, is the reason that there are such big, broad botnets nowadays, and it's the reason your grandmother probably cusses at her Windows XP machine. The WTF path, like I said, it could stand for what? It could stand for why. It's like, why are you still using it? What are you doing? The breach occurs. What now? Well, nothing. Susan in HR is just going to keep dragging that window down. It could say AV Giant 2015. Oh, it must be our AV. Drag it to the corner, keep doing HR work. Jake in HR, Jake in finance, Jake in any department is still using his machine even though it's infected. With a rootkit, you know, it's even harder to tell if it's actually infected. A lot of rootkits, they'll redirect your search results. How do end users not let this drive them crazy? Well, they just Google it, and then they copy the link out of Google, and then they paste the link in their browser bar, and that's how they search from now on. They don't click the link, which is going to just automatically redirect them to, you know, superpharmacy.ru. You know, don't be one of these people. So, yeah. Are you still using that machine? Please, please, please. Stop using the infected machine. I used to lead a malware response team at my former company. We would get on business networks, and it would just, there would not just be like a single machine infection still there from 2 months ago. There's still a worm running loose. They still have a server that they haven't booted in 7 years sitting there with configure on every shared drive. They could care less. Oh, what are we going to do with that server? Oh, you know, boot it up, see what we have on there, boom. You know, it doesn't matter if you have AV at that point either. Even if you booted that old server up, it has configure on all the shared drives. The AV on that machine, A, you probably don't even have the same AV vendor as you did back then, and B, it's useless. It's not going to stop the first 10 infections from other people. They're just going to click away. That's what normal users do. They click away, which is actually a funny thing. I have tried to act like a normal user. I tell people, just act like your grandmother. People are like, oh, you know, how can I get a box up that I can do analysis on? Remote into your grandmother's computer and see what she has installed and see how she uses her machine. You know, you got WeatherBug and all that other stuff. If you want to actually soup a machine up to look like a real user, for people in the mindset that we are, it's kind of hard. You don't want to do that to the machine. To get organically infected, you try to go through the same kind of website call chains that they did. You know, you go to Google and you type in you know, knitting supplies, and you click on that, and you try to replicate the exact call chain that got the machine infected in the first place. You can never do it. Unless you're actually analyzing those call chains that happen once you go to the website with all the ad servers populating with every single server that populates a file on that website. Unless you're looking granularly at that, you're not going to find it. So how do users get infected? Man, I wish I knew. I'd love to say AOL, but I don't see any malware targeting AOL. So the final breach response path I'd like to talk about is removal and analysis. And this should be done every single time, in my opinion. Some admins don't have time to do this stuff. Some IT departments do have time to do this stuff. So if you have someone that's interested in security in your IT department, stoke that fire a little bit. That dude is the guy that goes home, plays on VMs, and may have some know-how already to this subject. Find a fire that's already lit, stoke it a little bit. You know, it's how forest fires start. Only this is a good forest fire. It's a forest fire of information security knowledge that flows through your IT department. All of a sudden, you don't have to call your AV vendor when you find an infected box on the network. You have someone that's it's not just their job to look into this. They're highly interested in looking into this. And they're going to put tons of time into it, even in their spare time, because you gave them something super interesting to do. It's just very important to expose people to this stuff, because when do you ever see just a virus executable if you're not actually like looking for it or you're Googling for it or something? Hopefully you're not just going to turn your machine on and there's going to be like a virus executable on your desktop. I've seen it, mainly because Internet Explorer used to download to the desktop by default. you'd see MP3s, and then you'd see malware installer, infected PDF. It's on the desktop. It makes it even easier. So thank you, Internet Explorer, for that. So here's some things that I recommend that you do. There's just kind of general things. Once your network has been breached and you want to do a proper kind of method afterwards, you want to find out if you care about the company you work for, or if you care about the company that contracted you to do this, you might want to learn a little bit about this. And even if you're not going to use this stuff as evidence, or you're not going to present it to someone else, look through it. You know, even if this is just for you, having this data and being able to look at it and being able to correlate it to other things that you notice. If you're collecting PCAPs, you know, collect a bunch. See what the similar traffic is. Oh, you know, that machine was sent out UDP packets like crazy. You know, that thing is either a UDP packet machine or it's part of a botnet. So obtain a full or individual process memory dump. Now, a lot of us work for companies that have multiple offices. I formerly worked for a company, our IT department was in Florida. Our DC office had no IT company, or had no IT department. What are you going to do? Well, ask me to do everything, but say that there was an infection that happened, we're like, oh crap, you know, it was a developer's machine. We got to find out what happened. You know, something may have been leaked out. Is it still infected? Yeah. Where is it? It's in DC. Crap, you know, I'd like to get a full memory dump, but there's 6 gigs of memory on that box, and TeamViewer isn't exactly the most efficient thing to transfer files with. Now, granted, if you have a corporate VPN, if you have fast lines, FTP it, SCP it, something. You know, just don't anonymous FTP it, obviously. But if you can't get a full memory dump, get individual process dumps. I mean, don't just say, oh, I can't get a memory dump, move on to something else. You can actually, I mean, if you see Explorer.exe and it's using like 700-800K, something's up. Dump the memory of that process, save it in your folder, and transfer it away. You know, if Explorer.exe was sending out, you know, your contacts from Outlook, or, I mean, literally, people go after anything nowadays. If the targeted attack was getting the stuff that it was sent there to do, you want to know. You want to know, is it actively happening? So I was talking about PCAPs a little bit. Get a 30 to 60 minute PCAP. You know, a lot of people they think about the machine as the infection, but the infection is more than just the machine, it's spreading. It's either spreading your data to the web, or it's either spreading across your network and trying to do different things. You want to know exactly what it's doing. So use like Wireshark or like TCP dump. Have a machine sitting on the network that is just doing a 30 to 60 minute packet capture. I mean, you're not going to be wasting time. All you have to do is start it and wait 30 to 60 minutes and remember to turn it off. If you don't turn it off, it's just going to have a bigger PCAP, but that's no problem. But, you know, once you get that PCAP, filter it down. You know, look at the specific traffic that's coming from that box. It's going back to it. You know, look at all the TCP headers. Just look for anomalies. See if, you know, there's an encryption key that's being pushed out or something. But just get a PCAP. Everything happens over networks. Even though the infection is happening on the box, it's also happening over the network because you don't know what it's trying to do. So find out, or at least try to find out. Manual malware extraction. I recommend the shit out of this. So, and the reason I do that is because basically, if you look for malware, you're going to find out where malware likes to hide. You're going to get on a machine and say, oh, gee, I have a checklist of 20 places that I can look immediately upon, you know, enabling file viewing and whatnot. But I have 20 places I look immediately as soon as I get on a machine to see if it's infected, without running any tools. Tools are great, But I mean, just looking at something is even better sometimes. Windows 7, you're looking like program data, the user temp folder, the user folder, the roaming folder, you have just this mental checklist, and you don't have to have some notepad open or anything like that. If you have exposure to this stuff, you just do it. Like, I noticed a weird trend the other day, my friend just kind of picked up on it. Every time I SSH into something, I type ls immediately. Doesn't matter. I think almost everyone does. There's no reason. It could be the box sitting next to you. You remote in, you SSH in, you type ls immediately. You know it's there. Unless you're typing some string out that you're looking for something very specific, you type ls. Or you type like w or like something. You always have that one command that you always type no matter what. It just clicks as soon as you log in. Same with this stuff. If you just have a bunch of directories in your head, like the Windows temp folder, obvious. The user temp folder, obvious. Not so obvious places. Recycle bin directory. A lot of malware will hide in directories that created behind the recycle bin directory. How did we find that out? We looked. We did light analysis. We saw it was connecting back there. We said, oh, geez, it's putting malware in there. We better look here from now on. But we didn't write it down. It's just in your head. Type in ls when you log in via SSH, same thing. So, automated sandbox or manual analysis. Manual analysis is fun. It's time consuming, but it's fun, in my opinion anyways. So, manual analysis would basically be set up some kind of mini analysis environment and just take a registry snapshot, run the malware, take another registry snapshot, do a diff on them, see what's changed. Snapshots are a beautiful thing. Run the malware, take a snapshot, find it, remove one of the executables, see what's happening with it, take another snapshot. Snapshots are beautiful, but manual analysis takes a good amount of time. Time that your boss probably doesn't think that you have. And it's not you. It's not going to take you a long time. It takes as long as it takes. Your boss probably doesn't understand that, though. He wants to know what the heck's going on. How are we breached? I'm getting emails from Susie in HR saying, this is blah, 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 blah. How do we get an answer quickly? Well, there's automated sandbox technology out there. There's a lot of it. I would recommend having some type of automated sandbox technology in your environment. It doesn't have to be a commercial one. I mean, there's Cuckoo. You can customize Cuckoo like crazy. It's a little weird to set up, but once you have it set up, you can go. Or you could just pay a company that makes a sandbox product for their sandbox. Although it's a little more expensive than free, but you don't exactly get what you pay for in this situation. You get what you put into it. If you set it up to where it's going to be a very pristine sandbox and do exactly what you want, just take the time and set it up. But within maybe 15 minutes, if you have something like automated sandbox set up, or even a small little analysis network, everyone here probably has that purple Linksys laying in their closet, or every IT department has that extra router or ASA just sitting there. There's your analysis network. I mean, when I say analysis network, you can either have a box or a couple boxes connected to a router, or you could have one box with a bunch of VMs on it. I don't recommend VMs a ton anymore because a lot of malware checks for them. A lot of malware does weird queries, especially on VMware. I don't really recommend using VMware for malware analysis. A lot of you do. A lot of people do in general. But it's kind of what the authors go after the most to detect, because like a lot of commercial places have to have something you can license to put in their environment. So they have to choose VMware because you can license it. They don't run VirtualBox, you can't license it. Use VirtualBox, use KVM, anything out there. Just try to avoid VMware. But if you do have to use VMware, you can adjust it various ways so it's less detectable from malware. It's never going to be not detectable unless you're on a physical machine. Then the VM's not detectable because it's not there. Battle planning. Every organization should have at least one sentence towards a plan where you can respond after an infection. So provide training. And sorry to preach training, but make your IT department or IT person aware that this stuff is out there. Ask them questions. Come from BSides. Be like, hey, I heard about this crazy stuff. What do you think about it? If they say, I don't know, or I've never heard of it, probe them a little more. Find out what else they don't know. Then give them some exposure. I mean, seriously. Oh, well, we got this i5 sitting here with 8 gigs of RAM. It's not doing anything. I think you should take this box to your desk, install Windows, and infect it, and tell me what happened. Give exposure. And I'm not saying send someone out to a cert course or something like that. A lot of people with certs and malware, it's a weird area. There's certs that'll teach you, CEH, it'll teach you pen testing in a very, very low generic way. There's nowhere you can really send someone to learn malware. You can take a reverse engineering course, but the stuff I'm not talking about, reverse engineering, this is just general reactions to infection. If you have a reverse engineer on your staff, you don't need to be in this talk, because you probably have resources, hopefully, available to combat this stuff. But provide training. Find a piece of malware. They're not hard. Look in your spam folder. Some of you look in your inbox. Hopefully you have filtering. But find a piece of malware. There are places online, and I meant to have them listed, but I didn't list them. Malware domain list, Contagio dump, places like malcode.net, stuff like that. There are people that just document malware. They have scripts. They're just out there, and they're just pouring malware links, and you can get a piece of malware real quick. A lot of the links that end in .exe, usually IRC bots. The last talk described a lot about IRC bots. So, provide training, but in providing training for your IT staff or at least some member of your organization that has security know-how in some way, it's very important. Have multiple response solutions set up. So, yeah, have someone trained. Have someone that's been exposed. Have a plan. I'm not talking about highly complex stuff here. Just the fact that people don't think about this stuff is the worrying part. If you don't have a response solution in place, if your response solution to a malware infection is call your AV company, you don't really care about your data. Sorry to say that. It's too easy to call your AV company. If you came to BSides here, if you have a general interest in what everyone's been talking about today, you shouldn't call your AV company. You should try to deal with it yourself. You should have interest. You had enough interest to come here. You should have enough interest to look at that piece of malware and see what's going on your own network. AV companies, nothing against them. It's a layer of protection everyone needs. But if I wanted to watch someone run just some GUI program that they have no idea what it's doing for like 2 hours on my machine, I'd probably just install Minecraft and just tell them to play Minecraft instead, because they're not doing anything that's benefiting me. At least I can watch them screw up in Minecraft. So, multiple defense methods. AV. Have email filtering. Have a firewall. You'd be surprised how many people don't have these things. But there are other defense methods that aren't so generic. There are browser add-ons like AdBlock Plus. There are browser add-ons like Ghostery, NoScript. You'll always know if you sit down at a security person's browser, because none of the JavaScript will ever load, and the page will not render correctly ever. Sometimes it's just because the ads aren't there. Sometimes it's just because we don't like JavaScript. We may like to write it. We may like to play with it. We don't like it to load in our web browsers. Sorry. I don't care how neat the website looks. I'll run NoScript all day. So audit your damn network, please. If you can count, if you do an audit of your network, and you can count the versions of Java that are available on your network on your hand, you have too many. If you can count the versions of Java on an air molecule, you have just enough. None. Do not have Java on your network unless you have to run some legacy software that your company may be a little too cheap to upgrade, but you have to run it in Java Runtime Environment 5.0. Just take steps to mitigate that risk a little bit. Maybe keep an eye on that person's machine. Maybe have monitoring set up, something. But unless you absolutely need Java, don't have it installed, or don't have multiple versions installed. I mean, it's Windows already. How many attack vectors do you really need? I've seen 10 versions of Java installed. Why they even let you do that is beyond me. I understand it, but I don't really believe in it. It's mind-boggling. When you install Adobe Flash, which you shouldn't do, it uninstalls the old version, it upgrades it. Java, it's just, and pardon my French, but it's just an evolving pile of shit that keeps installing more on top of it. So yeah, don't install Java. So, tools of the trade. I may have spelled trade wrong. So, find and identify the malware. Dumps some memory. Use Process Explorer. Process Explorer is what Task Manager always should have been, which is why Microsoft originally didn't make it. They bought it off the person that developed it. Makes perfect sense. But Process Explorer is Task Manager on steroids. It lets you look pretty deep into the system. It lets you look at things in a different manner. Like even just, I mean, here I have an example of, hopefully it's not too blurry. It's actually not too bad. Just dumping an individual process memory. You know, this is me remoted into someplace in Idaho. It's a developer's machine, so it has like 12 gigs. I don't want that. I just want these little process dumps, and I'll try to make sense of them afterwards. But like I was saying, the execution tree is also important. If you see like explore.exe executing from winlogon with 2 n's.exe, you're in trouble. But as computer people, we can look at this tree and be like, something's not right. Why does SVC host have 2 V's? Why is it using 600K? And why is Security Center spawning it? You know, just general things to look at. It's like I was saying about the directories. You have a list of stuff that you already go through. You open this. You don't start right-clicking. You immediately just look at the execution tree. Oh, gee. And I've seen malware called malware. So malware.exe is running. Uh-oh, what do I do? Well, dump its memory. Look what it's hooked into, which is kind of what I'm going to go over here. So in Process Explorer, you can also find handles and DLLs that are kind of hooked into things. So an example of this would be the @ symbol here that I have. Even though when I ran this, it found Firefox, and it basically pointed out I have Ghostery installed in my Firefox because it's hooked into Firefox, right? The @ symbol used to be actually fairly significant when Zero Access came out. We noticed a trend where it was dropping this @ symbol file, and it was really hard to get rid of too, in this weird Windows directory where it like kind of mutilated a system shortcut, so it was hiding itself. Well, we started finding these files. We started doing handle and DLL searches for them. All of a sudden, the @ symbol, you would see it hooked into like services.exe. You would see it hooked into Explorer. You'd see it hooked into things that, you know, if you just do a vanilla search on a just plain machine, you won't see this. It's hooked into things that if you actually were able to kill the file or the files it was hooked into, it would disable the system, which is pretty clever. Something else you have to watch with this stuff is tripwires. Some stuff, you'll actually be able to delete it, but it'll get rid of your network adapter, and you're kind of screwed at that point. System restore, image the machine, and go make yourself a sandwich. So something else, Process Explorer, one of the number of super duper useful things Process Explorer does is, I call it steroids property mode. If you just look at the properties of a running process, you can see a good amount about it. And you can actually drill down a fair amount within the properties panel. It's not just a generic like 2-tab properties menu. It has version, publisher, stuff like that. You can look at the performance graphs. You can look at the disk I/O, environment, security, TCP, stuff like that. One of the main things I wanted to point out here, though, was they've added a feature where you can actually verify with Microsoft. You can verify the executable actually has the correct signature. And you can submit to VirusTotal from this properties dialog. Now, VirusTotal is a beautiful thing. Less beautiful now that Google owns them, in my opinion. But what this does, it doesn't send the executable to VirusTotal. A lot of, like, for instance, Metasploit has Veil Framework, where you can generate pretty much payloads that won't get detected by AV ever. So in their framework, they have something, and they just want to make sure that you don't upload one of their payloads to VirusTotal to give every major AV vendor a look at how they're doing this. What they're doing is a hash differential. So it just takes the MD5, sends it to VirusTotal. VirusTotal says, oh, I've never seen this hash before. Good, we'll leave it at that. I don't want you to have my file, especially if it was like a targeted attack. You don't want to upload some executable that, if I had a beer, I would drink from, say, this APT. But you don't want to send some executable that you got hit with from a targeted attack to VirusTotal. Whoever is analyzing that gets a hold of it, that has nothing to do with your company, might find something about your company in it. You might get called out on their Twitter or something like that. Don't be that person. Keep your executables. Just use hashes. Hashes are a beautiful thing. So second, dump all the memory. Dump it all. There's a lot of different ways you can dump memory. One of my favorites on Windows is dump it. It just dumps memory into a raw file and you transfer it away. Pretty simple. There are other utilities out there in the volatility suite, which you'll probably hear about here soon. You can dump memory. You can look at memory. It is a memory machine. But in a pinch, dump it. It's a statement and a tool. So the third tool I'd like to talk to you about, and sorry it's only 3, but I'm going to get kind of in-depth about this tool. It's a pretty unique little tool I found when I was leading our malware response team previously. So I do a lot of tool research, first off, and I was always after the tool that we could use to eliminate the virus on the computer in a way that the computer still runs and the virus doesn't tripwire or go crazy or delete itself or go into obfuscation mode, anything like that. I recommend researching and finding more tools that do the same thing, looking for alternatives, first off. So, anyways, I'm going to wrap this up rather quickly. So, anyways, if you're going to do tool research, don't just start using them, all right? All this stuff I've been talking about with Wireshark and all that stuff, if you're going to download a tool called tool.exe, dude, run it in an analysis environment first. The tool I'm about to talk about, awesome tool, but guess what? It calls out to China. Guess where it's coded? It's coded in China. Guess what it is? A really freaking awesome tool. I don't know who this kid is. I don't know why he did this, but he's basically gone against the mainstream thought of his own people and made a killer virus removal tool. So it's called Zueter, Z-U-E-T-R. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. I call it XT, because, well, it has an X and a T in it. The new version is called PC Hunter. It's available, if you go to the main site, it's all in Mandarin. I'm going to warn you. If you go to the download link I have here, it's just literally a listed web directory. So there's a few different things in there. There's a 64-bit version, a 32-bit version. The 64-bit version was the kicker. The kicker because not a whole lot of examination tools will let you look into 64-bit architecture while you're on 64-bit architecture. So anyways, really quickly, for one, it self-obfuscates. So when you start this up, it doesn't say Zueter at the top. It self-obfuscates. So it's a random string of letters every single time. Every time you start up, different. Drops its own driver to prevent from being detected. A lot of malware will actually listen for you to use, Process Explorer, TDSS killer. They'll shut them down as soon as you execute them and make them non-executable. This actually circumvents that. You can look directly at the kernel modules. You can look directly at the processes. You can look directly into ring 0 and ring 3 on 64-bit architecture. It's a beautiful thing. There's also some crazy file locking and someone really put a lot of effort into this, and he probably deserves a medal and probably to be hired by our country to do security for us, maybe code some tools for our government. Anyways, so moving along, you can look at the processes. You can look if they have ring 3 access, where they're located, what they're taking up, their PID. But the quick thing about this is there's an examination report section of it. Now, the examination report, you run it, every single one of those tabs that you can see, it pours the information out into a report for you. So if you're in a hurry, click Generate Report. It will tell you every single thing that's happening at that millisecond that you click that, give you a report on it, and then you can do whatever you want with it. It even flagged itself, as you can see, with the Mandarin. So highly recommend checking it out. Keep in mind, and I only know this because I properly look for tools, it calls out to China. It's probably just some update mechanism because it's fairly well put together GUI, but I don't care what it is. I don't want it calling out. So anyone that uses this tool, I recommend running Wireshark against it, getting those IPs, and maybe nulling them out in the host file of the machine that you're on before you actually use it. Just be safe. I mean, common sense. So other tools you should use, volatility, of course. Kali, you can do some DNS sinkholing and stuff like that. It's not just for penetration testing. You can run services, all kinds of stuff like that. Windows sysinternals, Process Explorer. There's a host of other ones in there that will help you and do things that you never thought your computer could do. Well, Windows anyways. Gmer, rootkit detection utility, play with it. Doesn't play well in 64-bit, just a little warning. Cuckoo Sandbox, if you don't know Cuckoo Sandbox, Google it and you'll see stories and white papers that go back 4 or 5 years. Wireshark, if you don't have this installed, you should install it as soon as you get home because you'll need it. And the logo's kind of neat too. It looks like a shark. So some bootable utilities to have available. These are all free. Helix, forensic investigation utility. Get on Helix. It has some investigative tools on it that you might use to look at the memory dumps. You might just use it to pull files off the system. Deft, I was looking for a Helix alternative, found Deft. Deft actually was able to load the Mac images where Helix couldn't. Some weird library was missing. Deft had it, Helix didn't. It's pre-compiled. I used bootable CD, so I didn't want to install a bunch of crap and burn the CD again. Hiren's boot CD, if you don't know what Hiren's is, look at it. Mini bootable Windows XP environment. G-parted environment, parted Linux, something like that. A lot of tools, probably slightly illegal due to the Windows XP portion. Doesn't matter, great tool. So the SIFT workstation, I believe it's just a workstation VM that you boot to. Download it, mount it, play with it. This sounds a little dirty. But take advantage of all this stuff. These are out there, they're free. Download all these, download all the things, play with all the things, no more things, basically. So, that's it. Hope you all enjoyed it. Any questions? I will take that as a no. Thank you very much. Again, not to plug CarolinaCon, but March 20th through 22nd CarolinaCon. If you want to come to the shootout, it's hackers.whatguns.com. Check us out. We like to hack, we like to shoot, we like to drink after we shoot. So, thank you very much.
Good stuff.